Your thoughts are not just mental, they are physical. And if you keep trying to think your way out of stress, out of overwhelm, out of your anxious feeling, out of frustration, without changing what your body is signaling to your brain, you may stay stuck much longer than you really need to. And this is important. If your physical state keeps telling your brain that something is off, something is unsafe, something is uncertain, then your thoughts will often follow that message. And over time, that affects your mood, your confidence, your energy, your decisions, your relationships, your performance, and your longevity. And you may think you have a mindset problem. But what you really actually have is a state challenge. So it's your nervous system being challenged. And here's the good news. When you learn how to shift your physical state, you can often change your thoughts much faster than you think. Pun intended here. You can become more regulated, more clearly thinking, more focused, more resilient, more capable, and that changes everything. Welcome, I'm Heike Fallon. I'm the founder of Expand Health and the creator of the NeuroHP method, and I combine neuroscience, sports therapy, and personal performance coaching to help people who are not willing to be limited. I help them optimize their health, their personal performance for longevity. And I always say, if you move better, you feel better, you live better, you think better too. For over 30 years, I've studied the brain, the body, and their connection. And today I want to share why changing your physical state can completely change the quality of your thinking. Not just your thinking, your emotional state, your stress response, and your performance. And also what you can actually do when you feel stuck or you feel off or tense or foggy or overwhelmed. A lot of people don't realize that many of their thoughts they are trying to fix mentally are actually being shaped by what their brain is sensing physically. So in this video, I'm going to break down the neuroscience behind this. Don't worry, it's not going to be super complicated, but I show you also how your body influences your brain and walk you through a couple brain-based exercises you can use to change your state in real time. But before we go into it, make sure you grab my free PDF guide in the description. You can download it, fill it out, and follow along. But I highly recommend to do that. It's very valuable content right there. But okay, let's get started. Let's just jump right in. So here's the first thing I want you to understand. Your brain does not create thoughts in a vacuum. It actually creates thoughts based on information. And that information is not just coming from your beliefs or your past experience. That is important too. It's also coming from your body, from your eyes, from your inner ear, from your breathing, from your posture. Everybody pops up when I say posture. Your muscle tension, your movement quality, your sensory input, your heart rate, your level of fatigue, your environment, and your brain is always asking, what is happening right now? Am I okay? Am I capable? Am I safe? Do I need to protect or can I perform? And when the brain senses uncertainty, it prioritizes protection over performance. And that is one of the most important things to understand. Because once the brain shifts into protection, your thoughts often change with it. So you may suddenly think, I can't do this. This is so much. I can't do it. It's too much. Why am I so overwhelmed? What is wrong with me? I'm behind. I'm failing. I can't focus. I need to escape. I need sugar. I definitely need coffee. I need to shut down. All of those thoughts come up. Now, are those thoughts always fake? No. But they often being amplified or shaped by your nervous system that is already feeling threatened, overloaded, or under-resourced. And this is where so many people get it wrong. They try to argue with their thoughts. They try to journal their way through thoughts. And that can work, that's important, but it's not the only thing. And oftentimes it doesn't work. And they try to force positive thinking. And again, I'm not saying mindset work is not valuable. It is. I teach it as well. It's part of it. But if your body is screaming danger, your body is receiving that signal all day, and you're trying to build calm thinking on top of an unstable physiology. And that is very hard. And honestly, it's exhausting. And here's what I mean. Have you ever noticed that when you're sleep deprived, sitting all day, shallow breathing, tight through your neck, your jaw, you're staring at the screens under pressure and not moving well, your thoughts tend to get worse. Now, you are more reactive, you're more impatient, more negative, more rigid, more doubtful. And then a completely another day, you slept better, you move, you breathe, you get outside, and you feel a whole lot more grounded. And suddenly, your problem feels way more manageable. And it's technically the same life, right? Just a different state. And this is not weakness, this is neuroscience. And when you understand that, you stop making everything so personal. You start getting more curious. You stop only asking, why am I thinking like this? And you start asking, really, what state is my brain in right now? And that question is really powerful because it gives you a point of intervention. And that is exactly what we want. And here's where it gets interesting. Your brain is not just reacting to the world, it is constantly predicting. It's making best guesses about what is happening, what is about to happen, and what you need to do about it. So that is a huge part of how your nervous system works. And the brain essentially trying to keep you alive by creating predictions based on the incoming input. And then it updates those predictions depending on the quality of the information it receives. And that means if the input is poor, unclear, stressful, threatening, the output can also become more defensive, more rigid, more anxious, more fatigued, and more protective overall. And that does not just affect movement, it affects thoughts, emotions, behavior, decision making, and even your sense of self. And this is something I teach my clients because so many people are trying to improve their life without realizing that the brain is making predictions through a stressed and or deregulated body. And that is like trying to accurately get directions from a GPS that is using bad satellite input. It doesn't work. If the input is not good, the output will not be good. So the output will be totally off. Now, let's make this a little more practical, right? Let's say you're sitting slouched forward for hours, let's say on your computer, your head in a forward position, your jaw may be tight, your eyes are just constantly locked in this one distance to your screen. Your breathing becomes actually shallow because your rib cage is not opening up. You get tight. Your feet are not getting a whole lot in sensory input because you're just in the same position. Your vestibular system is underused and your brain starts receiving very narrow, very threat associated, very low variability set of signals. And over time, that creates the brain state that feels tense, foggy, fatigued, irritable, less adaptable. And that's not because it's weak, it's because your brain is organizing around the information that is actually receiving. So your physical state is constantly teaching your brain what kind of world you're in. And if your brain keeps getting that message, tight, stuck, restricted, unpredictable, fatigue, then your thoughts often begin to match that world. And this is one reason why movement can change your mindset. Not because movement is anything magic, but because movement changes input. And when the input changes, the brain has a chance to update. And that is the whole game, really. Not just think better, but give your brain better information. That is always why brain based movement can be so powerful, because it's not just exercise for your body, but it's actually information for your nervous system. And it's a way to help your brain feel more certain, more organized, more capable, more clear. And that can absolutely change the quality of your thoughts. Now, let's go deeper into stress physiology, because if you're active, if you're a leader, if you're carrying a lot of responsibility, this matters a lot. Stress is not just emotional, stress is physiological. And your brain is always interpreting what level of demand it thinks you're under. And when the nervous system detects more demand than it believes you currently can handle, it shifts into protection. That can show up as muscle tension, shallow breathing, elevated heart rate, mental urgency, brain fog, poor sleep, and decision fatigue, and really reduced pain tolerance and more negative thinking. Because, again, your brain is not just asking, what should I think? It's asking, what do I need to do to survive in this situation? Because the brain's sole purpose is to keep us alive. And if survival or protection becomes a priority, your brain starts to favoring thoughts that are faster, more threat focused, more defensive, more black and white. And that is why when people are stressed, they often become less creative, less patient, less hopeful, less flexible, and less emotionally regulated. And this is also why people can suddenly feel like they're not themselves. They say things like, I don't know why I'm so reactive lately. I'm overthinking everything. I feel just exhausted. I can't focus, and I feel like my brain is not working. And often, what is underneath that is not just motivation issues, it is a state issue. Their system is overloaded. Their body is signaling too much demand and not enough safety, not enough clarity, not enough capacity, not enough recovery. And this is important because if you're living in that state, it impacts your longevity, it impacts inflammation. Inflammation usually goes up, it impacts your sleep quality, and it impacts your recovery, and then it impacts your ability to exercise well, connect well, lead well, and think clearly. And that matters because your quality of thoughts shape the quality of your life. And now I want to be very clear. I'm not saying every difficult thought can be solved with a movement drill. Be nice if it would be that easy, right? That would be way too simplistic. But what if I'm saying is, if you do not include the body, you're often missing a huge piece of the puzzle, because thoughts are not separated from your physiology, they are deeply linked to it. And this is exactly why the NeuroHP method looks at more than just the mindset or just the body. It looks at the brain, the body, the space you're living in, because your thinking is shaped by a whole system, not just one part. Now let's talk about emotional regulation, because this is where people struggle quietly. They're functioning, they're getting things done, they're still showing up, but internally, they feel like everything is so much harder than it should be. They feel more fragile, more reactive, more easily overwhelmed, and more emotionally tired. And they often think, I need to become mentally stronger. But often what that actually need is more regulated nervous system, because emotional regulation is not just about willpower, it's about capability and adaptability. So your brain needs capacity to pause, to reflect, to respond instead of react, and to tolerate discomfort, to recover faster, to hold perspective. And that capacity is influenced by your state, by your physical state. And if your body is highly activated, compressed, tense, fatigued, and under recovered, and getting poor sensory input, your emotional regulation often drops. Let me give you a real life example. Imagine two versions of the same person. One version slept poorly, stiff neck, tight jaw, rushed in the morning, coffee on an empty stomach, no movement, already behind, sits all day, eyes are strained, shallow breathing, eyes are strained, shallow breathing, and a difficult email comes in. That person is much more likely to think, this is a problem, I can't deal with this. Why is this always happening to me? This is too much. Now version 2, better sleep, more movement, little morning sunlight, better breathing, more sensory input, more organized system, more regulation. Same email, but now the thought is, okay, this is not ideal, this is not great, but I can handle it. Do you see the difference? Same person, same challenge, different physical state, different thought pattern. And this is huge because it means your emotional resilience is trainable, not just mentally, but physically. And that is such an empowering idea because it gives you more options. And you do not have to wait until your mind feels better to support your brain. You can start through your body, and that often opens the door much faster. I know you've been waiting. Let's get practical now. One of the fastest way to influence your state is through your visual system. And this is something a lot of people don't realize. Your eyes are not just there for seeing. They are a huge part on how the brain orients, predicts, balances, moves, and regulates. So your visual system feeds directly into your nervous system. It influences posture, neck tension, breathing, balance, spatial awareness, attention, and stress response. So when your visual system is overloaded, fatigued, or not functioning well, your brain often feels less safe. And when the brain feels less safe, thought quality can go down. And this is one reason so many people feel more drained, more irritable, more foggy, more tense after hours on the screen, right? Not just computer screen, also these kind of screens, right? It is sensory fatigue, and your eyes are doing a lot of work, and they actually require a lot of brain energy. And if they are not moving well, if they're not tracking well, if they're not relaxing well, that can affect the whole system. And this is where most people get it wrong. They think, I just need to focus harder. But often their visual system is already overloaded, and their brain needs better visual input, not more focus. So let's do a visual exercise. Actually, this is one with inhibiting instead of doing more, especially if you sat on the computer for a long time and your eyes are tired. This can be really good. I'm going to do it standing. If you feel more comfortable seated, that's okay. We are going to do a quick assessment. I'm going to put my arms forward. I like to do my rotation. My feet are still on the ground. I'm just rotating everything from hip, knee, joints, but the sole of my feet is on the ground. And I'm going to look over my thumbs here, see how far I'm rotating. So I have a little mark right here, and I know how far I'm rotating on my bookcase here. I have a marker there. So that gives me an assessment right now how good my range of motion is. So how tight I am right now. So what we're going to do is actually inhibit light coming in. We're going to make kind of like little cups here with the hands, with your palms. Keep your fingers closed. You're going to close your eyes. You're going to cover your eyes. Relax your shoulder. And this is called palming. So you inhale through the nose and a nice long exhale. Again, if you rather sit down or do it lying down, feel free to do that. So it's an inhale through the nose, long exhale through your mouth. Make sure you're inhaling with the diaphragm so your belly and lower ribs expand. And long exhale. And inhale. Definitely make sure relax the shoulders. With every exhale, relax a little bit more. Two more cycles of breath. Good. Slowly open your eyes. Now we're going to reassess it. I'm standing at the same spot. Going to put my hands again together and I'm rotating, and I'm actually be able to rotate a little bit further. That means my brain, like this input, or actually in this case, the inhibiting of input. So less input coming in through the visual system right now, and actually help my system to calm down, which let me move further because now I got looser because my system is not as much in a threat response. So if you got more range of motion, this is a good exercise for you to do. If you have the same, then that input or less input coming in wasn't really impacting your brain very much, so you might want to stick around for the other exercises. If you had less range of motion, it might have been you've been standing and that was a threat for your system. I would highly recommend to try this seated or lying down, and then reassess and see if that works better for you. So, but this is really a great exercise when you're sitting at the computer, or there's a lot of, if you've been in a busy space with, a lot of stuff going on, giving your eyes a little break, giving your eyes a little rest can really impact how your brain functions. Now let's talk about another big one, your vestibular system, your inner ear, your balance system, and it plays a massive role on how secure, stable, and oriented your brain feels. And, the vestibular system helps your brain to know, where am I in space? Am I moving? How fast? And what direction? Can I trust my body here? And when this system is not getting enough healthy input, or when it's underused, undertrained, or stressed, your brain can become way more protective, tight too, right? And that can show up even in neck tension, in motion sensitivity. So if you get car sick, right, it can show up in anxiety, brain fog, fatigue, poor balance, poor spatial awareness, and yes, even more reactive thinking, because the brain loves predictability. And the vestibular system helps create that. This is one reason why some people feel strangely off, disconnected, or overwhelmed after long periods of stillness, screen time, or traveling in an airplane or car, stress or lack of movement variety. The brain has not been getting the kind of vestibular input it needs to feel organized. And if your brain does not feel well oriented, it often increases protection, which again changes your state. So here is a simple exercise you can do to train your vestibular system. Now, you've maybe done it with me before in some other video. So I'm going to tell you how you can kind of modify that a little bit. But we first want to do an assessment again. So put your arms out in front because we want to see where you're at, right? And I help my mobility here. So I'm kind of right here, and in my bookcase, I can see where I'm there. And so now what we're doing is we're going to find a focal point straight ahead. So if I'm looking actually at my camera right now here, we want to just move the head up and down while keeping the eyes on one specific target. If you've done this already with me, before I challenge you, put your feet together or stand on one leg doing this. and you can challenge yourself a little bit. So if you have not done this exercise before, please keep your feet hip width apart, stand nice and steady, or even do it seated if you're feeling more comfortable, if you know you have a history of a weak vestibular system. So we're gonna go up and down, keeping the eyes on a specific target, and then we're gonna reassess. And I got, again, more range of motion for me. Now I'm going to show you another one. Other parts of the vestibular system get also activated, and I like doing this particular exercise if I sit a long time and I feel like I need to move a little bit. If you just bounce a little bit up and down, so this up and down movement also activates the vestibular system. Now, if you want to do it even more, you can jump all the way. I'm just doing a little bouncing with my heels off the floor. And we're going to reassess that again. So this one, about the same for me, because I already had quite some good input from the one before. But see which one worked better for you. Maybe the bouncing is a quick one for you to really activate your vestibular system again, to get your physical state shifted so you can actually influence your brain even better. Now let's talk about breathing. And I want to be careful here because breathing advice is often oversimplified. Not every breathing tool works for every person in every state. That matters, because if you're very anxious, very, air hungry, or already feeling threatened, certain breathing exercises can actually make you feel worse. So you want to make sure that you're using the right tool for the right moment. But in general, breathing is one of the most powerful ways to influence your physical state, because your breathing is both autonomic and trainable. And it gives you a direct way to communicate with your nervous system. And when breathing becomes tight, shallow, high just here in the chest and fast or irregular, your brain often interprets that as stress. So even though you might not originally be stressed, or outside factors not stressing you, but just because you're breathing faster because you're not using your diaphragm, the brain thinks you're stressed. And then those thoughts often match that signal. And it's why people can feel more panicky or more urgent, more emotionally reactive, or more mentally scattered when their breathing is dysregulated. Again, not because they're weak, because their brain is receiving a message. And this is where it gets powerful, right? If you can improve the message, you can often improve the state. And that can shift the quality of your thoughts. So also what you want to do is you want to train this breathing exercise in a state first where you're not feeling anxious or overthinking. Because again, when you do it in that position for the first time, then that may not work. So you want to actually train and practice good breathing when you're calm, when you're in a safe state, and when you feel comfortable. And then when you practice that a lot, then you can apply that more likely, more successfully when you're overthinking, when you're feeling anxious. So what we're going to do is particular training using the diaphragm. And I know you would think we all breathe with a diaphragm, but hardly any of the people coming into my services don't breathe right. They breathe up here, or they hold their breaths, particularly when they're exercising. Are you holding your breath when you're exercising, or you continue breathing when you're exercising? So pay attention to that. But what we want to really do is expand the rib cage around the lower ribs. So we don't want to just do belly breathing. We want to actually expand. I call it 3D breathing. We want to expand all the way around. So it's very important that you're not breathing here, not this, right? Not just up here, but we want the shoulders relaxed, and we want to breathe in here, right? So we want to expand right through here. Let's do first again an assessment. Okay, so we want to inhale through the nose, expanding the rib cage. And exhale. Inhale through the nose. And exhale. You may also, if you can, put one hand in the front, one in the back, because you want to feel movement in the back as well. Now try to make the exhale a little longer than your inhale. Two more times. Good, calms me down for sure. I can feel it. You may notice already too that everything feels calmer, more relaxed. If not, you might want to start practicing. Let's reassess. Okay, that got me again slightly more range of motion. Again, if you have the same range of motion, this exercise may not be the one that will actually help you to get the most calming effect. You might want to do a different exercise. If you had more range of motion, that was great. If you have less range of motion, that means your system responds with the thread. So I recommend, again, do it seated, do it lying down, and start a little smaller, not to overthink the breathing too much. Just kind of lay down and just focus first just on the belly, and then working your way, expanding more into the 3D. Make it like smaller steps to get there. Because when you're breathing with a diaphragm, that should not be a threat response, because breathing with the diaphragm is tremendously important to activate the vagus nerve. So now let's zoom out for a second, because I want you to really understand how practical this is. A lot of people have had the experience of, starting the day in one state and then feeling completely different after a walk, after a workout, after getting outside, after moving, after breathing, after laughing, after dancing, after doing something physical. That's why my morning routine oftentimes involve actually music and some dancing. And they say, I don't know why, but I feel so much better. Well, there is a reason. You changed the input. You changed circulation. You changed breathing. You changed sensory input. Your visual behavior, vestibular input, your joint input, your muscle activation, your posture, your prediction. You gave your brain a new story through the body. And then your thoughts had a chance to shift. And this is something I see all the time. A client starts a session feeling off, discouraged, tired, mentally heavy, stuck in that loop. And when we change a few inputs, sometimes it is just the eyes, the breath, like we did, head movement, foot pressure, jaw relaxation, neck positioning, spinal motion, or something very simple. And suddenly their state changes. They feel lighter. They can think more clear. They feel less threatened, less stuck. And often they say something like, I feel like I can think again. And that matters, because once the state changes, your access changes. Your access to problem solving, to perspective, to possibilities, to confidence, and to action. And this is one reason I care so much about brain-based movement, because it gives people a practical way to stop being trapped inside the current state. It gives them a way in. And if you're active, you're a leader, and you're carrying a lot, you need tools like that. Not just motivation, not just theory, but tools. And that's why I created the NeuroHP Movement Library with all kinds of brain-based exercise. And if you want to learn more about it, there's a link in the description, so check that out. But Now let's talk about one more layer here that most people overlook. Joint input, pressure, posture, and basic sensory input from your body. Your brain depends on sensory information coming in from your joints, from your skin, from your muscle, from your feet, your neck, your spine, your jaw, and all more of that. This is how the brain knows where you are and how you are positioned, how stable you are, and how much effort it needs to produce. So if your body is not moving much, or you're spending a lot of time in that same position, sitting on your chair, on your couch, or scrolling with the head down, you have tension and restrictions in certain areas, and the brain can start working from a poorer map, because the brain has a map of every joint, every movement that we do. And so when the map gets a little fuzzier, the brain becomes more protective. And when that map gets fuzzier, the brain often becomes more protective. And that can influence pain, mobility, tension, confidence, movement quality, and yes, the mental state. Because a poorly mapped body often feels less reliable to the brain. And less reliable body often creates a more cautious internal state. And that's why small movement inputs can create such a big shift, not because they're fancy, but because they're improving the mapping. And this is one reason why something as simple as, a wrist aid, or an ankle circle, or a weight shift, or spinal movement, jaw relaxation, or inhibiting light coming in, can change how you feel mentally, because the brain is getting better input. And here's a simple example. Let's say someone feels that foggy, that mentally stuck in the afternoon. Instead of only reaching for more caffeine, they stand up, walk barefoot for a minute, shift their weight, move their ankles, move, their wrists, rotate your spine, look far away and close, like change the input, change your breathing, and suddenly they feel more awake. Why? Because they improved the state through input. And that is the lens I want you to start using. Not what is wrong with me, but what input does my brain need right now? That is a question that can change a lot. So how do you actually use this in everyday life? What do you do when you notice your thoughts are getting worse? Your patience is lower, your stress is higher, your focus is fading, or your emotional state is just slipping away? Here's what I recommend. First, the awareness, right? You want to be aware of what state you're in before you make any personality problem. Name the state that you're in. So say to yourself, my system feels like whatever, overloaded. I feel under recovered. I feel visually fatigued. I feel physically, exhausted. I feel overactivated. That alone can create a little space, because now you're observing and you're not reacting. And then you want to reduce that load. Ask yourself, what is adding to the stress signal right now? Too much screen time, too much noise, too much sitting, too much rushing, too much decision making, too little fuel, maybe you have to eat, too little movement, too little sleep, too little recovery. What is it? You want to make sure you are not trying to mindset your way through the system that simply needs less load. So then, as a third step, we change the input. And this is where these tools come in. You change the visual input, like we did the exercise, your breathing, your posture, your head movement. You change your environment, or just any movement. You, like I said, you go outside. So get better information into the brain. That is often the fastest leveler. And then you reassess. Then you check in. What has changed? Do I feel better? I walked outside. I come back. Do I have more energy? Do I feel more grounded, more focused, less threatened? That teaches you something very valuable. It teaches you that your state is influenceable. And that is huge, because once you know you can shift it, you stop feeling quite so trapped in it. Let me give you a simple example. I worked with someone who was incredible, capable, very smart, very successful, very disciplined, but by the afternoon, her thoughts would get darker, more self-critical, more discouraged, and she thought she had a mindset problem. But when we looked at the full picture, what we found was really hours of screen time, minimal movement, neck tension, visual fatigue, shallow breathing, and almost no reset points throughout the day. So no breaks to reset the nervous system. So we didn't start to try to fix her thinking. We started by changing her state. A few short resets, like one visual drill, a breathing, a neck-friendly vestibular work, just working on some foot awareness, small movement breaks. And what happened? Her afternoon thinking changed dramatically. Not because life became easier, but because her brain was getting better support. And this is the difference, right? And this is one reason I'm so passionate about helping people understand that health and performance and longevity are not just about doing more. They're about becoming more efficient, more aware, more skillful, more connected to the system. And this is where the real change happens. So if there is one big thing you want to take away from this video, it is this. Your thoughts are not separated from your state. And that is actually good news because it means you have more influence than you think. And you don't always have to start with the thought itself. So sometimes the smarter move is to change what your brain is sensing. That means change the input, change the state, and often the thought will follow. So that's not avoidance, that is more intelligence, that is working with the nervous system. That is self-leadership, that is brain-first health. And when you think about that, that is such an empowering shift because it gives you something practical to do. Not later, not when life slows down, but today, when you feel off, when you feel foggy, when you feel tense, overwhelmed, or stuck, or mentally just heavy. Pause and ask, what state am I in right now? And what input might my brain need next? That question changes your day. And if you practice it consistently, it can change a lot more than that. Don't forget to share this video with anyone that you think will benefit from it and needs to know this. I constantly upload new science-based content and follow along exercises, so make sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out. And if you're already taken or you're ready to take more action, check out my NeuroHP movement library. There's a link below. I'm Heike Fallon, and I hope you will start investing into yourself today because you deserve it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next episode.